Hello everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure, true, brutal, and kind. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things when we get them. I wish you an enjoyable watching time. Julia sighed heavily and looked around the kitchen. Everything seemed to be in order. Not a speck of dirt anywhere, just the way she liked it. Dinner was on the stove. The kids were fed. Now she was free. She could do what she liked to do, but first she had to take a shower. Julia took off her apron and hung it on the back of her chair. She went into the bedroom, grabbed a fresh robe and headed to the bathroom, quickly washed and changed. Oh man, this one won't tighten either, Julia grumbled as she tried to button the robe. She looked sadly at herself in the mirror. Yes, she had gained a little weight lately. Julia frowned. What's the big deal? Not a little, but a lot, and it was becoming noticeable. This robe she bought a month ago because all the old ones were too small for her. Now it does not tighten. Julia, without looking in the mirror, tied her hair into a tight ponytail, smothering the flaps of the robe. She quickly jogged into the bedroom, opened the closet, and sadly looked at all the shelves. Well, there was not much choice. Almost all things were too small, and Julia was in no hurry to get a new closet. There were two reasons for this. First, she hoped to lose weight, and the second, she had no extra money to update the entire closet because Julia still did not work. After the birth of her children, her husband provided for the family alone. To update the closet, his salary is not enough. Sighing heavily, Julia pulled out the long t-shirt she had worn when she was pregnant with Helga. She wanted to cut the shirt into rags, but never got around to it. Well, now she would have to use it again for its intended purpose, to pull it over her full body. After putting it on, Julia was pleased to note that it looked quite decent. It's not that bad, Julia. Don't talk too much about yourself. You just had 2 children. You have got a great body. You should be glad. You couldn't boast of such a gorgeous bust when you were young, she said, looking at herself in the mirror. Then Julia looked into the nursery. Peter and Helga were playing. In an hour she would have to put them to bed, but in the meantime she could get ready for work on the loggia. Then she would put the children to bed and sit down for her favorite work. Julia went to the loggia and turned on the light. How lucky they were to buy this apartment. It was just a huge loggia. It comfortably accommodated everything for Julia's favorite hobby, which made her forget about everything in the world. Julia dreamed of becoming a sculptor and thoughtfully pursued her dream. She lovingly began laying out her tools, spatulas, and knives on the table. There was also a board for modeling. She took out a packet of clay and carefully laid it on the table, then laid out all the tools in the order in which they would be useful to her today. A smile played on her face. Julia had never studied modeling professionally. She had no art education, but she had a gift. Since childhood, she loved to model with plasticine. Such figures turned out the teachers at school took them to exhibitions. She adored modeling and was very sad that when she left her parents' house, her mother threw away all her exhibits which the girl had so lovingly kept for many years. But after school, she no longer had time to sculpt. She wanted to become a doctor, but she couldn't go to university, so she went to college. After graduation from college, she wanted to go to college, but she met Tom. 6 months later, she was already pregnant and they got married. Family life began, because of which Julia had absolutely no time to deal with her hobby. When Peter grew up, Julia again remembered that she wanted to go to university. But she got pregnant again and they had Helga. Helga was calmer than Peter, and Julia had more free time. She started to explore information on the internet. One day she came across a video clip where a woman was teaching how to make beautiful sculptures with clay. Julia watched several lessons, and she couldn't tear herself away. Decided to give it a try. She succeeded and set up a workshop on the loggia where she could create beauty. Julia woke up and looked at the clock. It was time to put the children to bed. Her and Tom's children were not capricious. She managed it in 15 minutes, and it was not necessary to spend a lot of time with them. Julia kissed the children, wished them good night, turned off the light, and went to the loggia. She put on her apron and got to work. Soon an intricate figure began to form under her hands. Julia could model faces, heads of people and animals. Now she gave free rein to her imagination and forgot about everything in the world. She even lost track of time. It was as if she was in another reality. There was a small tape recorder on the windowsill, playing soft and quiet music. Her eyes lit up, her hands moved incessantly. Julia was in her element. When her husband came home from work, the infatuated wife did not even hear his footsteps. Not finding her in the kitchen, he immediately realized that she was on the loggia. Standing in the doorway, Vanya watched what his beloved was doing. He called her name softly, but she did not hear. "Yule, I'm here," Tom said again, but Julie was all at work. Then Vanya carefully entered the loggia and gently touched her shoulder. "Oh, God!" Julia exclaimed. She jumped up in her chair and twitched. Immediately a piece of clay fell off the figure. "Come on, what are you? I told you not to scare me when I'm working. Look what you've done. I'm almost finished, and you've spoiled everything," Julia said in annoyance. Tom frowned. "And why are you blaming me? I called out to you, and you don't answer. I just touched you, and you twitched your own hand." "If you hadn't frightened me, I wouldn't have twitched," as Julia grumbled, trying to reattach the piece of the fallen-off figure. But it was no use. The figurine was ruined. Julia put the torn-off piece on the table with annoyance and looked at her husband. "You could have left me alone. Dinner's on the stove. You could have eaten yourself, and I would have finished here," she said. "It's not the job that got me to you anyway. I thought you were going to sit with me tonight. We hardly ever see each other. I go to work. You're on the loggia. I come home from work. You're here again. It feels like you do nothing else at all." Vanya answered with a disgruntled look. "Yes. And dinner cooks itself, or what? And the children feed themselves and bathe and go to bed and do their own laundry. And someone else does the cleaning too, I guess." Tom opened his mouth but said nothing. Julia sighed and closed her eyes. There were these quarrels again. They'd been getting more frequent lately. She needed to pull herself together and calm down. She sighed and said to her husband more calmly, All right, I'll come over and heat up dinner for you. There's nothing else to do here anyway. I'll try to fix it tomorrow. Go ahead, I'll put away all the tools for now," she said. Tom left. Julia began to tidy up her table. She was very unhappy. Everything was going so well until her husband came home from work. He was always bothering her. But when Julia had put everything in its place, she had already calmed down. Tom was really right. With his shift, they had not talked for almost 4 days. She went to the bathroom, carefully washed her hands and face, then threw the apron into the washing machine and went into the kitchen. Her husband looked his wife over from head to toe, lingering on her old stretchy t-shirt. "What kind of look are you having, Julia?" he muttered. Julia looked at herself as if she was seeing her for the first time. She shrugged. "What's wrong with the way I look?" Working view. "Tom, you have work clothes, right? I have work clothes too. Think of them as my work clothes." Julia laughed a little, thinking it was a good joke. However, Tom's face did not change. It was clear that he was dissatisfied with the sight of his wife. Julia silently heated his late supper and put the plates on the table. Tom sat down and began to eat. Julia made herself a cup of tea and sat down next to him. She looked at her husband, but he averted his gaze. Somehow the conversation did not click. They just sat silently at the same table. Something had been wrong between them lately. Of course, Tom was getting very tired. They were an ordinary family. The poor husband worked in the factory in shifts, and on weekends he worked in a cab to earn an extra penny. The lack of money in everyday life took away all the romance of their family life. Passion had long since disappeared between them. However, Julia still believed that all was well. They loved each other, respected each other, and passion fades with time, doesn't it? Although it's probably too early to talk about it. It's only been 8 years since they were married. They were young and full of energy. When Julia had her second child, Tom supported her and helped her. She told him how nice it would be if she had a part-time job sitting at home. She chose her hobby. She wanted to model and sell sculptures of clay and plaster, but that required training. At first she wanted to try it herself at home and then find some courses. Tom liked the idea. They went and bought everything they needed, and now Julia has been doing her hobby at home for 3 years. However, the children were growing up, and she was running out of money. No courses were out of the question at the moment, and Tom realized that Julia could not make any money at once, so his joy at his wife's new hobby faded. Over the past few months, he often grumbled that it was all she was doing, wasting her precious time in vain. Julia tried in every way to convince him that everything was ahead of her. She could succeed, but Tom did not believe it. "How are you doing at work?" cheerfully asked Julia, trying to start a conversation with her husband. Tom grudgingly looked at her and replied, "You ask as if I work in a bank. Have you forgotten what it can be like at work? It's just the same as usual. Do you want to know how many pipes I moved today, or how badly I fought with the sales girl? Should I tell you how many curse words she said to me, or how the foreman called me in to reprimand me?" he grumbled. Julia blushed slightly. "Yeah, that's not how you should have started the conversation." "No, of course not. I just wanted to know how tired you were today. Maybe we could watch a movie or have a drink or something. It's your day off tomorrow. We have a bottle of wine. We can open it. We'll have a drink," she suggested it. Tom almost choked. "Julia, what wine do I have to drive in the morning? Have you forgotten? Drink it yourself. If you want, I'll go to bed." There was a silence. Julia realized that there was nothing to count on for a private evening. She sat next to her husband for a few more minutes, washed her cup and said, "Oh, I don't want to sleep yet. Why don't I sit on the loggia then? I have some sketches to draw." "Good night then." "Good night," Tom muttered back. When Julia left, her husband watched her for a few minutes. He wrinkled his nose because he had very unpleasant thoughts in his head that kept him awake and did not allow him to relax. He, too, had noticed that things were not working out between him and Julia lately. But why should he lie? It had been going on for a long time. It all started when she got involved in this worthless sculpting. That's when of the moment Julia had changed. She used to be cheerful and liked to go for walks. They often went out to visit. Since she gave birth to Oya and settled in her loggia, it was as if she had been replaced. Now Julia tried not to leave the house unnecessarily. Of course they went shopping, but only out of necessity. She couldn't get my wife out to visit or just go for a while. She rarely even met her friends anymore. Angela often invited her to visit, but she only went to them for birthdays. Yes, they of Julia talked on the phone, but Julia hardly ever left the house. Every free minute she liked to spend on the loggia, doing her nonsense. Tom was sure that this was what caused the cold between them. Julia led a sedentary lifestyle. This led to the fact that she gained a lot of weight. Naturally, Tom noticed what she was wearing today. He remembered that old T-shirt she had worn it when she was pregnant with Helga. He had no idea she had left it behind. That old shabby thing should have been in the trash a long time ago. But his wife had taken the liberty of putting it on and presenting herself to him in such an inappropriate manner. She looked like a scarecrow, and he was even ashamed to look at her. If any of the neighbors had seen it, Tom would have fallen through the ground. Of course, he still had some feelings for Julia. He really wanted his wife to come to her senses. She must give up her hobby. It did not bring any good, only harm. Julia was not making any money. She had lost her good looks. Soon she won't be able to go home because she won't be able to go home because she won't fit in the opening. When will it come to her that she needs to change her lifestyle? How to convey to her that she is making an irreparable mistake? Thinking about all this, Vanya sighed and put the empty plates in the sink. He wanted to wash them, but changed his mind. Let his wife help him better. It's good for her to move around in the morning. At least she can shake off her fat. Some time passed, and the situation in the family became more and more heated. Ivan was unhappy that Julia did not want to change. The money became even more scarce because his part-time job was a bust. The competition was too strong. There were too many cab drivers, and Tom was bringing home pennies. One day, Tom tried to remedy the situation with his wife by suggesting that she exercise at home. There are so many videos on the internet. You can do something without leaving home. Kirill told me that his wife lost weight this way. She didn't even have to go to a sports club. She just studied the YouTube videos. I think that's a good idea. Why don't you do it? He told her. Julia frowned and looked at her husband. Tom, do you think what you say? How will I do it at home? We don't have much space, and I don't have much time either. But if you were to stop sculpting, you could clear enough space for classes. Summer's coming up. You could give up your hobby for a while to take care of yourself. Do I look that bad to you? Julia got a little worried. It's not that bad. I just want you to look even better. I told you summer's ahead of us. I don't think we'll go to the sea this year, but we can go to the river at the weekend. Won't you be as hame to take your clothes off? Julia didn't answer. Vanya did not bring it up again, but she realized that she looked worse than she thought. Julia did not exercise. She just went on a diet, but it did not help much because the diet had to be followed. And she forgot to eat during the day and then in the evening. In the end, she lost weight in a month. 5 kilos. But that wasn't enough. We needed to lose another 20 kilos. Tom noticed that his wife lost a little weight and cheered up. He kept giving her compliments, trying to encourage her. He did not know that she was on a diet, but thought she was exercising when he was not home. But another month passed, and his wife didn't lose any more weight. Vanya began to get discouraged again. Then he thought that if they went out together, she would see what other women looked like and take up the slack. He thought they should go out together. And then the opportunity presented itself. His best friend Kirill had a birthday party. He invited Vanya and his wife to his house for a party. The friend and his wife lived in a large private house. The party was going to be a big one, with lots of people coming. It was a good time for Julia to show her face in public. Maybe she would notice the stares and realize that she needed to do something about herself. He didn't care if he embarrassed himself or his wife. He was willing to go to drastic measures to bring Julia to her senses. Let him embarrass himself once, but then he will boast of a slender wife who, after such a shake-up, is sure to lose weight. However, when her husband asked her to go out, she flatly refused. I will not go anywhere. I do not have a suitable outfit. Buy takes money, and we do not have extra. And anyway, I don't think you should go to Thomas. You have to make a gift or give money. And our finances are singing romance, you know. Tom got angry. What are you really? He is my best friend. Are you suggesting that I forget about it? Even if I have no money, I'll still go to his birthday party. You know he won't mind if I don't get him anything. If you don't want to go, I'll go anyway. We don't go anywhere anyway. I'm not going to pass up an opportunity like this. I need to have a little fun. Forget the household problems. Have some fun. Talk to people, after all. If you don't want to, I'm not going to sit at home with you. You sit there and mold it for yourself. I'd rather go hang out with my friends. Talk to people, have fun, and have a drink. Go ahead. I do not force you to stay home. If you have such a relationship with Carol, go have fun. And I'll stay home with the kids. Tom did just that. He went to his friend's birthday party alone. He tried to forget about his family, his wife. He wanted to feel young. In fact, he was. He was only 30 years old. Carol had a very young wife. She was only 24. Her birthday party was attended by many of her young girlfriends. Tom felt very young among this crowd. He had completely forgotten that he had a wife and children. The party was huge and lasted until morning. Tom didn't even call home to warn Julia that he would be late. She didn't call him either, and he had a blast. He got very drunk. A friend and his wife invited Vanya to a barbecue the next day. They were going to have a little get together for a hangover and a nice meal. The man agreed. He arrived home toward morning. Julia was sound asleep. Tom was excited about the party and could not sleep for about an hour, remembering the details of the evening. It had been a long time since he had had so much fun and time. Julia got up earlier than her husband. She didn't wake him up and was hardly angry with him for staying up so late. She herself sculpted the figure until late at night. She made a very beautiful sculpture, and she was proud of herself. Tom woke up and told Julia that he was going to see Carol again. Of course, he offered his wife to go with him, but he knew that she would not agree. And so it turned out. Julia was not happy that her husband was leaving again. She was counting on him to help with the children and household chores, but she said nothing. Once again, a noisy group of friends gathered at a friend's house. There were many of his wife's girlfriends. When he went to the bar to pour himself a beer, someone touched him on the shoulder. He heard a flirtatious voice. Tom turned around and his jaw almost fell off. A beautiful young girl was standing in front of him. She was looking at him with amusement and smiling. Beautiful long hair fell down on her shoulders. A light summer sundress opened her gorgeous breasts. The girl held an empty glass in her hands and held it out to Tom. "Sure, I'll pour." "What kind of question is that? How can you refuse such a beautiful woman?" answered Tom, smiling. He felt like a male. This pretty girl, once again, a noisy group of friends gathered at a friend's house. There were many of his wife's girlfriends. When he went to the bar to pour himself a beer, someone touched him on the shoulder. He heard a flirtatious voice. Tom turned around and his jaw almost fell off. A beautiful young girl was standing in front of him. She was looking at him with amusement and smiling. Beautiful long hair fell down on her shoulders. A light summer sundress opened her gorgeous breasts. The girl held an empty glass in her hands and held it out to Tom. "Sure, I'll pour." "What kind of question is that? How can you refuse such a beautiful woman?" answered Tom, smiling. He felt like a male. This pretty girl smiled at him so invitingly and promisingly that his heart even beat faster. How long since he had flirted with anyone? And this young lady was so beautiful that it was sheer pleasure just to talk to her. Tom poured the girl a beer and handed it to her. "Please, baby, drink it in good health," he told her. The girl put the glass to her mouth without taking her eyes off Vanya. She took a sip and licked the foam from the beer which was left on her lips with her soft pink tongue. Vanya felt aroused. His breath was taken away from this sight. However, the girl's next phrase brought him down from heaven to earth. "And why are you so familiar with me?" "Did I ever let you do that?" Smiling slyly, the girl replied. Olivia paled. He realized that he had overreacted. He had not spoken to ladies for too long. He had completely forgotten how to flirt. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm sorry," he mumbled, stammering. "Oh, come on, I'm only joking. You what? Let's just skip the name. My name is Olivia, and you're supposed to be Ivan. Come on, let's dance. My favorite song is playing. I'll never forgive you if you don't ask me to dance. I'll never forgive you if you don't ask me to dance," leaving her glass on the bar. It was the best dance of his life. He forgot about everything in the world. The girl was a wonderful partner. Not only did she move beautifully, but she didn't make Tom feel inferior, since he couldn't dance at all. She complimented him, smiled and wiggled her hips, pressed close to him. After the dance, she whispered in his ear, "I haven't danced like this in a long time. I loved it. I'd like to do it again, just not here, but somewhere private. Maybe you'd like to come upstairs with me. There's a place up there where we won't be disturbed." Tom was dumbfounded by the suggestion. He had never expected that this young girl would pay attention to him. Naturally, he took advantage of her generous, unexpected offer. In all the years he had been married, he had never once cheated on his wife. Of course, from time to time he had such thoughts, because family problems and everyday life did not allow him to relax. And the intimacy between him and Julia has not been, so the sudden love affair with this young girl really excited him. She apparently also liked everything, because she gave Vanya her phone number and said that she would love to meet him again. And it would be even better if he asked her out. Vanya understood that he needed to dot all the I's, so he told the girl, blushing with embarrassment, "I really like you. But you see, the thing is, I'm married. I have children. I don't argue. I've had problems with my wife for a long time, but I wasn't going to leave her, so I don't know if there's any point in us seeing each other." He really hoped that their next meeting would still take place, but he understood that Olivia was too young, and she, "Do you even know what you're saying? I'm disgusted to be around you, not to mention anything global. I have a girlfriend, she's younger than you, and she has a great figure. She takes care of herself and doesn't let me come out with a dirty head or bad breath. And you do it regularly. I'm tired of it. I'm done with it. You've turned the kids into your likeness, too. I don't want to see that. Stay with them. Do what you want. You can't count on me anymore. I'm quitting and going away with my girlfriend. We'll get married. I'll get a new job. I'm filing for divorce. I'm not claiming the apartment. I don't need it. I'm leaving it to you and the kids. But do not expect anything more from me." That's it. Tom packed his things. A couple of hours later, he left for good, and Julia was left sitting in the kitchen with her hands over her mouth so as not to scream in pain and despair. She did not know what to do next, and had absolutely no idea how she would survive alone in this world without a job with 2 children. 2 years passed, sighing heavily. Julia slowly walked to the house. Today was the last straw. She could no longer work in daycare. She would have left by herself, but she was fired, and the manager did not even ask her to work 2 weeks, seeing the despair on Julia's face. After Tom left, she simply did not know what to do. One of her best friends worked as a kindergarten teacher. Angelica offered to hire her as a nanny. Julia agreed. Angela always envied her friend, though there was nothing to envy. Her family life had not worked out. Her husband left her. She became fat, but she had no husband at all. So she was jealous that the modest Julia immediately married after college. When Angela found out that Julia had been left by her husband, she rejoiced. Offering her a job as a nanny in a kindergarten, she wanted to pinch her. It was a thankless job. Nannies were given all the dirty work, fiddling with children, toiletries, cleaning. Angela regretted that she could not get her friend into her group. The headmistress said that she needed a nurse in another group. Julia came to the daycare center to meet the Emily. She liked it, and Julia believed that everything would be fine, and she would like the work because she loved to tinker with children. She naturally had to give up her hobby of modeling for an indefinite period. The priority was to take care of the children. Julia had to work in order to have money to support them. It was very hard for her at first. After graduating from college, she never worked a day in her life. It was hard for her to go back. Nanny's job was very hard. Ekaterine was a strict tutor. When Julia began to make comments to her that she was too strict with the children, the teacher looked at her with anger. Only a month later, Julia realized that she had turned Ekaterine against herself. The woman was vindictive. She could not stand the criticism against her. If she saw that, after the punishments, the girl was trying to comfort the children, she began to shout, "You have a higher education, that you interfere in the educational process. I punished the child, so he must be punished. What right do you have to interfere? I will complain about you to Emily. She'll punish you. That's what you want, to lose your bonus. Do you want your children to starve? Think of them when you're messing with those brats. Look at you, you come in here, you beauty. You beauty, you come in here, you beauty. You think you can defy me? If I see you interfere in my educational work again, you'll regret it. And I won't even look at the fact that you're Angela's girlfriend." Oh, those girlfriends didn't need someone else's problems. A man who is older than her and who has an impressive weight behind him in the form of, "Do you even know what you're saying?" We're solving problems. You sit on your logia day after day and you don't even notice that you become fat as a pig. Look at yourself in the mirror. I'm disgusted to be around you, not to mention anything global. I have a girlfriend. She's younger than you and she has a great figure. She takes care of herself and doesn't let me come out with a dirty head or bad breath. And you do it regularly. I'm tired of it. I'm done with it. You've turned the kids into your likeness too. I don't want to see that. Stay with them. Do what you want. You can't count on me anymore. I'm quitting and going away with my girlfriend. We'll get married. I'll get a new job. I'm filing for divorce. I'm not claiming the apartment. I don't need it. I'm leaving it to you and the kids. But do not expect anything more from me. That's it. Tom packed his things. A couple of hours later, he left for good, and Julia was left sitting in the kitchen with her hands over her mouth so as not to scream in pain and despair. She did not know what to do next and had absolutely no idea how she would survive alone in this world without a job with 2 children. 2 years passed, sighing heavily. Julia slowly walked to the house. Today was the last straw. She could no longer work in daycare. She would have left by herself, but she was fired, and the manager did not even ask her to work 2 weeks, seeing the despair on Julia's face. After Tom left, she simply did not know what to do. One of her best friends worked as a kindergarten teacher. Angela offered to hire her as a nanny. Julia agreed. Angela always envied her friend, though there was nothing to envy. Her family life had not worked out. Her husband left her. She became fat, but she had no husband at all. So she was jealous that the modest Julia immediately married after college. When Angela found out that Julia had been left by her husband, she rejoiced. Offering her a job as a nanny in a kindergarten, she wanted to pinch her. It was a thankless job. Nannies were given all the dirty work, fiddling with children, toiletries, cleaning. Angela regretted that she could not get her friend into her group. The headmistress said that she needed a nurse in another group. Julia came to the day care center to meet the manager, Emily. She liked it, and Julia believed that everything would be fine and she would like the work because she loved to tinker with children. She naturally had to give up her hobby of modeling for an indefinite period. The priority was to take care of the children. Julia had to work in order to have money to support them. It was very hard for her at first. After graduating from college, she never worked a day in her life. It was hard for her to go back. Nanny's job was very hard. Ekaterine was a strict tutor. When Julia began to make comments to her that she was too strict with the children, the teacher looked at her with anger. Only a month later, Julia realized that she had turned Ekaterine against herself. The woman was vindictive. She could not stand the criticism against her. If she saw that, after the punishments, the girl was trying to comfort the children, she began to shout, "Do you have a higher education that you interfere in the educational process? I punished the child, so he must be punished. What right do you have to interfere? I will complain about you to Emily. She'll punish you." That's what you want, to lose your bonus. Do you want your children to starve? Think of them when you're messing with those brats. Look at you. You come in here, you beauty. You think you can defy me. If I see you interfere in my educational work again, you'll regret it, and I won't even look at the fact that you're Angela's girlfriend. Oh, those girlfriends. How many times has the girl tried to explain to Ekaterine that she has absolutely no claim to her job? All was to no avail. The teacher became embittered at her and did not accept anything. Julia realized that it would be too hard to work. She tried to talk to her friend, asked Angela to convince Ekaterine that Julia was not so bad. But Angelica only shook her head reproachfully. "You're stupid, Julia. Why are you prying into things that are not asked teachers? A separate caste. And you, nurse, do your job. And do not pester the children for no reason. If a child pees his pants, change his pants. If snot is running, wipe it off. Don't bother. Your job is to clean up. Put them away. Give them food. Put them to bed. That's your job. And the caregiver is teaching. Don't you dare get involved. It's your own fault. You're too smart. You're not acting right." What should I tell Ekaterine? She's a smart woman. She's experienced. She's been working for so many years. If she behaves that way with children, it's the right thing to do. You can't do it any other way. Stay out of this. You always feel sorry for everyone. It's people like you who make icicles grow up instead of full-fledged human beings. You raise your own kids the same way. You're always nagging them. They'll be clinging to your skirt till they're 40. Oh, Julia, if I'd known you'd behave like this, I wouldn't have put you here. I'm ashamed of you now. Tatiana will think that I deliberately wanted to spite her by putting you with her. Julia did not expect such a thing from her friend. After this conversation, she cried all night. She wanted to quit her job, but realized that she had to work. It is necessary to feed the children, and for this, she must earn money. Along the way, she will look for something else. Maybe something better will turn up. But for now, she has to stay in this place. When Julia stopped contacting with Ekaterine, it became easier. She ceased to cling, but all the time watched, suspiciously waiting for a cat. Julia thought that everything had settled. She worked in such a mode for a year and a half. But then something happened that put an end to her work. It happened this morning. In the kindergarten, there were two children who were constantly in conflict. Mary and Adam had poor parents, ordinary factory workers, and Adam was the son of rich parents. His mother came to pick him up in an expensive foreign car covered in gold and diamonds. She smelled of expensive perfume. She had the latest model of iPhone. She consistently changed them every 6 months. My mother's name was Anna. Tatiana Grigorievna constantly ingratiated herself with her, trying to curry favor with her. Anna regularly carried packages to her, made her birthday presents, not just candy or champagne, but something very expensive. Ekaterine never disclosed what it was, but she was constantly wearing new silver bracelets, then a thin gold ring, then earrings with emeralds. It is clear that on a teacher's salary cannot buy such things. This morning, Mary and Adam had a big fight. Adam hit the girl. Julia often comforted the little girl when Adam hurt her. She said she had to learn to defend herself. And this time, Mary defended herself. When Adam hit her, she took a wooden figurine of a dog and with all her might smashed it on Adam's head. The boy started bleeding. He yelled a lot. There was a commotion. Ekaterine began to groan and groan. A nurse was called. Thank God that the cut was small. It was not necessary to put stitches. The blood was quickly stopped and the wound was sealed up with plaster. Within an hour, everyone had calmed down. Naturally, Mary was punished, though the girl assured me that Adam hit her first. She even had a bruise on her temple. But no one saw the incident. Only Julia believed that Mary was telling the truth. All the other children were for Adam. Everyone loved him. He was always treating the children to delicious, expensive candy. Mary was punished. She stood in the corner and cried. When Adam's mother came, a new commotion arose. Ekaterine was ready to fall through the ground. Julia was a witness to how Anna was arguing with the teacher and decided to intervene. You know, it was not so, as you say, Ekaterine. I, of course, apologize, but I must tell you the truth. Adam hit Maru hard. She has a bruise on her temple. She was just defending herself. Anna scowled at the nurse from head to toe. Then she answered arrogantly, "Who are you, anyway? And who gave you the right to talk to me?" "My name is Julia. I'm a nurse." "You shouldn't make such a fuss. There's nothing wrong with Adam. He and Mary have made up. Mary has been punished. But you should talk to Adam, too. He's always picking on Mary and hurting her. He hit her first today. I know that for sure. Nanny, mind your own business. Have you forgotten your place? I'll remind you. Your place is in the toilet. Washing the toilet after my baby and wiping his ass. And don't you ever open your mouth again. Get away from me. I don't want to talk to you." Julia was taken aback by this insult. "How dare you talk to people like that? Just because you're rich doesn't give you the right. Yes, I wash toilets. Wipe your son's ass. But I'm a human being. I work here. I have responsibilities. And your responsibility is to raise your child. Only you don't seem to be doing that at all." Anna opened her mouth in amazement and then started screaming, "How dare you speak to me like that? Have you forgotten who you are? I'll destroy you. You'll never set foot here again. You'll pay a fine for talking to respectable parents like that. There you are. Look, telling me how to bring up my child. Watch yourself. I've never seen such insolence. If I had known such nannies worked here, I wouldn't have brought my child here. It's your fault, Ekaterine. Why didn't you warn me that such a person worked here? I would have taken measures to keep her away long ago. I'll go to the manager right away, and she'll be fired today. Get out of my sight, or I'll call my husband, and he'll tear the place apart." And Julia realized that it would be better if she did not get involved with this woman. An hour later, Emily called her in. She regretfully announced that Julia could be free. "You can no longer work for us." "There is nothing I can do, unfortunately. Anna Viktorovna is a very respected person in our city, or rather her husband. They regularly donate large sums to the kindergarten. They have great connections in the Department of Education, in the ministry, in the administration. If I start defending you, everyone will turn against me. And I value my place. She filed a complaint against you. She said that if I don't fire you, she'll go to the police. I don't know what she'll say. That's why it would be better if you left. I would put you in another group. But Anna Viktorovna said that if she sees you at least once, we'll blow everything here. Unfortunately, you cannot hide. I'm sorry, but you don't work here anymore." Julia was shocked, but surprisingly even relieved. It was such a hard job, not physically, but mentally. It was too unbearable for her to see all the injustice that reigned in the kindergarten. The children were separated according to the status of their parents. The teachers groveled to the rich and humiliated the poor. The nannies were treated like servants. It was all horrible. Having plunged herself into this world, Julia felt disgust at everything that was going on here. Now she was walking home and did not know what to do next. Fortunately, she managed to raise a small amount of money. Considering that she didn't earn much, it was even a feat. It should be enough for her for a couple of months. However, it was urgent to look for a job. When Julia got home, she went straight to the shower. She needed to cry. She often cried under the shower so the children wouldn't hear. She didn't want them to see how hard it was for her. This time the tears didn't come for some reason. Probably because Julia was relieved that this hell was finally over. After her shower, she went to the mirror and looked at herself with some embarrassment. In a year and a half, she lost 20 kilos. Against the backdrop of stress, the weight was falling off rapidly, and her skin began to sag, so Julia started exercising based on YouTube videos. She was still young, so her skin recovered quickly. Her figure became slim and trim. Of course, there were still traces of stretch marks on her body after she put on a lot of weight, but it was nothing. They were not too noticeable. But with the closet had to tinker. Some things even had to be sewn. It was a good thing she had a sewing machine at home and knew how to sew. She did not have to buy many new things. She sewed up her old dresses and suits. Of course, they didn't fit as well. She was not a professional seamstress, but she thought that would do. Who was she to show off in front of? She wasn't looking forward to a new relationship. She had children to think of first. The disappointment of her marriage had been so intense that she had promised herself she would never marry again, though she didn't even believe anyone would offer her that. Julia sighed and put on a house dress. She did feel a lot better after she lost the weight. It was easier to breathe, easier to sleep, easier to sleep, easier to walk. Her legs stopped hurting, her shortness of breath disappeared. Julia grinned bitterly. Her husband's departure had had a positive effect on her in a way. Tonight the children went to bed by themselves. They noticed that their mother was upset and decided not to disturb her. Julia moved into the kitchen and washed the dishes. She made herself some coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. After sitting for a few minutes and giving in to the impulse, she headed for the loggia. Once there, she had a strange feeling. How long since she had been here, how long since she had sculpted anything. She had not touched clay or plaster in a very long time. She always felt good when her hands were busy. Maybe if she started modeling again, she would feel better. For some reason, with her husband gone, she couldn't bring herself to come in here. He constantly reprimanded her for disappearing out on the loggia, doing nothing. And now Julia just couldn't bring herself to even open the box of clay. But today she was relieved to be out of kindergarten. Why wouldn't she take another decisive step toward changing her life? What would happen if she just sat here one evening doing what she liked? Nothing would change. She would be able to relax, get her thoughts in order. Maybe something would come to mind and there would be a way out of the difficult situation she found herself in. It was so wonderful to be back in the place she had loved with all her heart. As soon as her hands touched the instruments, Julia almost cried. And why had she deprived herself of the pleasure of all this time that was going on in her head? She could at least for an hour in the evening sit on the loggia and do what she loved. It was with bitterness that Julia realized that it was all because of Vanya. His hurtful words had been sitting firmly in her head, and today it was as if she was rid of it. She realized that she was the only one in charge of her life, and no one had power over her. If she wants something, she will do it, and she doesn't have to think about her ex-husband, who didn't appreciate her at all. Julia sat on the loggia until morning and molded a gorgeous figure. It was a girl with one hand clasped to her heart and the other raised high to the sky. Her face was turned upward. On her head was a shawl that came down over her shoulders. The girl was on her knees. It was incredible. Julia herself did not understand how she had managed to sculpt such a masterpiece overnight. Of course, the outlines of her face were not very clear. But every gesture of this kneeling person expressed despair and at the same time, hope that she could get help. Julia understood that she was not a professional, but an amateur. But she was still proud of herself. She hadn't touched clay in more than a year and a half, and now she expressed all her emotions in this figurine. The night was coming to a close when the girl was finished. The clay had already begun to cool. Julia decided that she would put the figure on a pedestal and keep it on her shelf in a prominent place, so that the figure would remind her of the difficult state she had been in for a long time. But now she was rid of all the bad things that were oppressing her. Now she decided that things would be different. She would change her life. Completely exhausted, Julia collapsed on her bed and slept until noon. The children got up on their own. Today was the day off. Peter made himself and Helga some cocoa and small sandwiches. Julia woke up to a phone call. Her friend Ina called. "What are you, dear? Thought you were going to drive me crazy. Angela told me you were fired. I've been calling you all night. Your phone was off. I thought something was wrong. You gave me such a scare. I could kill you. What's wrong with your phone?" Julia was so sleepy. She barely knew what she was saying. She pulled herself up and answered in a sleepy voice. "Oh, nothing happened. They fired me, yes. Did that idiot tell you yet? I don't want to talk to her. I should have stopped talking to her a long time ago. I just unplugged my phone and worked on the Logia till morning, and now you woke me up." "Working? Did you start molding again? What is going on with you? I'm freaking out." "I don't know what's happening to me. I feel a change in myself, but I don't understand it completely. I'm not sure," said Julia. "Is that so? Tonight I'll come to you with a bottle of wine, and you'll tell me everything in order. And what's your problem with Angela? Why are you turning your phone off? I'll see you tonight." Julia didn't even have time to answer. Ina hung up. Tonight Julia also wanted to spend the evening sculpting, but she knew that if Ina promised she would come for sure. Her friend came in the evening and brought not even a bottle of wine, but 2 whole. By the time the first bottle was finished, they had already had time to discuss her relationship with Angela, her job at the daycare center, her ex-husband leaving and raising children. While Julia uncorked the second bottle, her friend went to the Logia. Julia found her there. The friend had a look of interest. She was looking at the figure that Julia had sculpted at night. "Julia, I've never seen such work from you. You have a real talent. Are you sure you haven't been practicing all this time?" "No. It was the first time in a long time that I sat down to work yesterday. I made this one overnight." "Do you think that's not bad either?" Julia asked hopefully. "Not bad?" "Yes, it's just gorgeous. I cannot even believe that you did it. Listen, I have an idea. I thought it was just a hobby, but now I think it's more than that. You know what? I think people should see what you're doing. In our city museum, we have different exhibitions on a regular basis, and then there's photographs and paintings, and then there's sculpture too. Why don't you send a photo of your work there? In fact, I think you could make money on it. You could send your work to auction houses that sell contemporary art. I saw it on TV once. They put everything on display there. Some of them are so gorgeous, and sometimes it's total crap. But there are people who like such things, and some people make good money at it. You have a gift. Why don't you try your luck?" Julia grinned nervously. "Oh, tell me too. What auction houses? Who needs my craft?" Ina took her friend by the hand. "Julia, but it's not just a craft. It's a real masterpiece. I assure you that it deserves everyone's attention. If I, not a connoisseur of modern art, consider it a worthy reward, then the real connoisseurs will tear off such a work with hands and feet, believe me. And anyway, you can just try your luck without counting on anything. If it doesn't work out, you won't be disappointed. What if you get lucky? Imagine what kind of luck that would be. You never know where success awaits you. What if that's what you need? I can see you put your heart and soul into that figurine. I think I can even hear it whispering a prayer. Think about what I told you. If you decide, I will help you. We'll send letters with pictures together, and I will help you to write a literate letter." Julia brushed it off and made a joke. However, she sowed doubt in her. After all, it was not for nothing that the figure had been born to her in just one night. So, it really was worth something, and the author had put her heart and soul into it. Maybe someone would really like it. Maybe she could get some money for it. This, of course, from the world of fantasy dreams. But still, it depends. Anything could happen. However, after her friend left, the woman gave up the idea. Under the influence of alcohol, she believed in something that cannot be. Exhibitions and auctions show people who know something about art. And who is she? No one. Never learned anything anywhere. She was just a single mother of two, and she needed to find some work to feed them. And this is a hobby for the soul and a comfort. But it can't be serious. As her husband rightly said, it is stupidity which will not bring her income and success. Julia started looking for a job. She wanted to get a job as a nurse, but they wouldn't take her anywhere. She stayed at home for years, never worked a day after college. One hospital told her that her diploma was invalid. She had to undergo specialization and retraining to confirm it. Julia didn't know if this was true or not, but she had no time to study again. She needed to find some kind of job. She got a job as a clerk in a store, but after a month she was fired because a big shortage was discovered. Julia understood that she could have been at fault. She had never been involved with money. It was hard for her to get involved in work. She was constantly miscalculating, making mistakes in numbers. Customers complained about her that she worked too slowly, and she realized that this job was definitely not for her. For a while, she had to get a job as a janitor, cleaning stairwells. She was ashamed to be educated and work as a common janitor, but it did provide some income. For a while, she had to give up her hobby again. Every time she stepped onto the loggia, she remembered her friend's words and immediately left without even taking the job. She tried not to remember what Ina had told her. It was too tempting, so much so that it seemed like a pipe dream. And then, one weekend, Julia became very bored one evening, and she decided to mold something. She got a bottle of wine from her locker, put the kids to bed, and poured herself a glass. She sat down on her chair on the loggia. After sitting there for half an hour, the girl realized her hands were itching. She was eager to work, and she sighed, poured herself another glass, and began laying out her tools. This time she sat again until morning and sculpted the figure of a man. He wore a cloak and folded his arms across his chest. His head was slightly lowered, as if he were looking at something. His whole posture expressed arrogance and denial. When the figure was ready, Julia looked at it carefully, and suddenly it hit her. She pulled back the rod and pulled out a female figure from the windowsill. The kneeling woman put the woman next to the man, and her mouth dropped open in surprise. The two figures complemented each other. It was as if they did not exist separately, but were one. The woman knelt and held out her hand toward the man, and he stood looking down at her, as if the woman were begging for mercy, and the man was rejecting her. "Oh," Julia Leah Riol could only utter, and indeed such work is worthy of being seen by others. Julia has nothing to be ashamed of. She is an amateur, but she made these masterpieces with such soul and feeling that they express all her emotions. It is as if she poured out in these figures all that she felt. She felt lightheaded, even though she was almost halfway through her bottle of wine. There was clarity in her mind. Julia knew firmly what she was going to do next. Leaving the figures on the table, she made her way to the bedroom, fell on the bed, and instantly fell asleep. A couple of hours later, she woke up and immediately called her friend. "I'm going to send you a picture. It's another one of my works. Tell me, doesn't it make you feel like something is missing? Look at it and then call me back, okay?" Julia said. "Yes, go ahead." I'm waiting, Ina replied. Julia took a picture of the man's figure and sent it to Ina. Exactly 1 minute later, a call rang from her friend. Julia answered the call with her hand to her heart. I know what's missing is the figure of that woman on her knees. It's like one sculpture. Right? Did you sculpt the man specifically for her? Ina asked excitedly. No, I didn't think of the kneeling woman. I molded a man for nothing, said Julia thoughtfully. No, dear, you made it consciously. You have a real gift. You didn't even think about it. You had the whole picture in your head. Now, I'm 1,000 sure that you will have to send me pictures of your work. Julia sighed and closed her eyes. You're probably right. It's worth a shot, she told her friend. And then everything spun and spun. A representative of one of the auctions which by happy coincidence was held in their city responded to a letter, Julie. They were interested in her figurines and happily agreed to auction them off. Julia could not believe her happiness. The auction was supposed to take place in a week. Julia was sent 2 invitations. She decided to go together with her friend, who was the instigator of it all. And then even more wonderful things began to happen. At the auction, several buyers were interested in Julia's work. On the first day of the auction, there was just an exhibition where people were walking around looking at different pieces of contemporary art. There were a lot of people near Julia's sculpture. She was afraid to come closer and was very worried that nobody would like her work, but she was wrong. Her sculpture of 2 figures created a furor. The next day, there was an auction, and several people were fighting for her sculptures. The final price of the figures of a man and a woman stunned Julia. Considering that the organizers of the auction received a solid percentage, Julia Leah still had a very impressive sum in her hands. She could not believe her own happiness. Even stranger magical events occurred after the auction. Several representatives of exhibitions from other cities approached her. They offered to share their work with her. Julia admitted that she did not have enough works yet. The organizers agreed to wait a few months so she could prepare for the shows. Amounts raised for figurines man and woman was enough to live a comfortable life for a few months. All this time, Julia was working, and every day a new sculpture was added. After she exhibited her work in several cities, she gained popularity. Her sculptures were quickly purchased. Julia had the kind of money she had never seen in her life, and then she was invited to exhibit her work in the city. The Museum of Modern Art gave her a small room where she could exhibit as much of her work as she wanted. It was a free exhibition. She could not only look at it, but also buy it. Julia quickly gained huge popularity. After 2 years, she was not only rich, but also famous in her town. It was a real success, the success she strived for from the very beginning, and she was able to achieve everything. Now she was confident and self-sufficient. She could no longer worry about the future. She would be able to feed her children. Ivan stared annoyedly at the television screen. He saw his ex-wife. It had been 10 years since they divorced. Everything had changed. Tom was quietly getting drunk, and his wife was on TV. Was he worthy of such a life? Is it fair? After his divorce from Julia, Tom left for another city with Olivia. 6 months later, she left him. You see, he was too infringing on her freedom. All he wanted was for her to marry him. He never found a real job, and he started to drink himself to death. He worried that Olivia was always disappearing at work with new friends. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and told him to go away. Tom had some savings, so he rented an apartment and went to work at a factory. However, his craving for alcohol did not subside, but grew stronger and stronger. He worked at the factory for 10 years. He was not promoted to foreman because he was too fond of alcohol. He did not start a new relationship and became angry with women. After Olivia no longer trusted anyone, there were casual relationships. One woman even liked him. She wanted to live with him, but his addiction to alcohol destroyed all the good that could happen to it. Tom was lonely in this world. He had no contact with his children. He didn't even think about his ex-wife. And now he sees her on TV. He immediately went to the internet and found a lot of interesting things. It turned out that his wife had become a very popular and wealthy woman, and still succeeded. Her hobby turned into a professional job. Apparently, she made a decent fortune on her hands. She had a fancy house, a cool foreign car. Does she get paid so much for these sculptures that she became so rich he was forced to live a miserable existence in this hovel and work in a factory? It wasn't fair. Why couldn't she have been successful when they were married? And why wasn't she so pretty? She had lost a lot of weight, slim, well-groomed, completely unlike the fat woman she had been when he was around. He only recognized her because her name came up on TV. Of course, when he looked closely, he realized that it was Anna. Her hobby on the old logo had turned his ex-wife into a successful beauty. With grief, Tom got so drunk that he couldn't go to work in the morning. When he woke up and hungover, he looked at the calls on his phone and found out that he had been called 50 times, decided to ignore his boss. He already knew what he was going to do. Go back home and ask his ex-wife for help. She should help him. After all, he had helped her when they were married, provided for the family. When she decided to get involved in art, he'd buy her the tools she'd use on the loggia. Yes, he did all that. And she should help him too, and he'll try to make contact with his children. Will cry and say he's sorry for what happened. He'll say he was just embarrassed, communicate with them, because he had abandoned them, would beg for forgiveness. He really hoped that with the help of his former family, he would be able to get his life together. That same day, Vanya bought a train ticket, packed a suitcase, and left for his hometown, hoping he was on his way to a new life. With the suitcase, he stood outside the home of his wife and their mutual children. He rang the bell on the gate several times, but no one answered. For a long time, he stood near the gate, occasionally sitting on the suitcase. His legs were aching with fatigue. He was terribly hungry, but he waited stubbornly, not wanting to miss his chance. Julia arrived in the evening. The gates began to open long before the car pulled up. Vanya immediately jumped up and stood beside them so she couldn't get past. The car stopped a few meters away from him. Julia got out of the car and turned pale when she recognized her husband. "Tom, is it really you?" said Julia in amazement. He even smiled slightly and spread his hands. "Yes, it's me. Julia, I really need to talk to you. Can you give me some time? It's important. Talk. I don't know what we can talk about." "All right, well, stand back. I'll drive over to the garage. Open the gate and you can come in." A few minutes later, the man was in his ex-wife's new house. He looked around admiringly. The house was simply huge. He had never dreamed of such a thing, and his wife had managed to earn it on her own. That made him feel even more nauseated. Julia took him into the study. "So what did you want to talk to me about?" she asked coldly. And then Tom began to implement his plan of action in complaints. In a whiny tone, he began to tell about his life. He said that the girl who seduced him tricked him in the cruelest way, forced him to divorce Julia, promising that he would get a high-paying job in another city. But it was all a lie. When they moved, she left him, and he wandered the streets trying to find his own sustenance. Then a kind man got him a job at a factory. He slept in a homeless shelter for a while, and then he was able to rent an apartment. All this time, he was very sorry for what he had done to Julia and the children, but he was terribly ashamed to approach her. And now he's been fired, and he can no longer rent an apartment. He asked Julia for help, asked if she would let him live in their old apartment. He would start a new life, try to fix things up with the kids. He talked non-stop. Julia couldn't even get a word in. The apartment was sold. At last she was able to say, "What am I going to do? I was counting on it so much. Where am I supposed to go? I don't want anything from you. I won't bother you anymore. I just wanted to stay in the apartment until I get back on my feet. I really want to make things right with our kids. I'm so sorry I missed out on those 10 years. I've lost so much, but it's all my own fault. Well, it's up to me to clean it up. I'm gonna go. I have nothing else to do here. I'm sorry for bothering you." Tom sighed, looked sad, and got up to leave. "Wait, sit down." Julia stopped him. Tom threw a meek look at her and lowered his eyes to the floor. He modestly sat down on the edge of a chair and folded his arms in front of him. Julia thought about something for a few minutes, tapping her fingers on the table and not taking her eyes off her husband. She felt sorry for him. Indeed, he had supported her when she had decided to take up sculpture. At one point, he even believed she would succeed. She tried to forget the insults he had hurled at her before she left. Indeed, if the girl had seduced him, forced him into a divorce, he was only partly to blame for their family falling apart. Julia gets a hello from the past in the form of her alcoholic ex-husband. He was ashamed to call, and that was good. So he knew he was guilty in front of her, in front of the children. Maybe she should give him a second chance. Julia, of course, had no intention of going back to him. She just wanted to help. If he could make contact with the children, they would have a father. He deserved to be happy too. After all, she had achieved everything. Why shouldn't she share some of her success with her ex-husband? He had once meant a lot to her. She had no feelings for him now, only pity. But he deserved to start his life over too, and she was willing to help. "Okay, I'll help you, but I'm not doing it because you told me about your life, but because you are the father of our children. We had good times too, and we loved each other. That's in the past. But in remembrance of the good times, I will do what I can. I'll give you money and have my assistant find you a place to live. I'll buy a little house for you so you can start a new life in it. I'll help you get a job. I know a lot of people who will be glad to help me, but just promise me that you will behave properly. I can't vouch for you if I'm not sure." She gave him money, and the man got a hotel room. A week later, she called and told him she had arranged to buy a house. She dictated the address for him to drive up there, gave him the keys that evening. "I'll give you the phone number. You will call a man named Vladimir, and he will help you with the job. Tomorrow I'm leaving with the children for the exhibition. I told them you were back, and they're willing to talk to you. I will be in Europe. We'll be back in 3 weeks. When I call you, you can meet them." Peter is acting a little wary, and Helga has taken your return with enthusiasm. She's very hopeful that things will work out. "Don't let me down, Tom. I've done enough. All you have to do is take advantage of my help. If everything goes well for you, I'll be glad." "Everything will be fine. I promise I won't let you down," Tom answered happily. The next day, the woman flew off with the children to an exhibition. While sitting in the plane, she felt something on the plane. She felt something unsettling. She felt as if something bad would happen, but she thought it was the excitement of her husband's return. He had stirred up too much with his arrival. She hoped everything would be all right. 3 weeks passed. The sculptor returned from her trip and called James, who told her that her ex-husband never called him. This really surprised her, so she went to see her ex. What she saw when she arrived shocked her. He came out to her unshaven and breathing such an inhalation that she almost recoiled. All these days, at her husband's house, there had been a real booze fest. "Tom, what is going on? Why didn't you call James? He was supposed to get you a job. And what kind of company are you having at your house? Oh, Julia, you're back. Why didn't you call? I would have prepared for your arrival. They're old friends of mine from the factory. I used to work with them. I didn't call James because I found a job myself. True, I only worked 3 days, but it doesn't matter. I would find it anyway. We're celebrating Alex's or Maxim's birthday now. Or maybe it's Dennis's, I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. I'll kick everyone out now and we can talk. But Julia refused to talk to him. Now she decided she would come the next day and hoped he would be sober. The next day, Tom met her already sober, but she could tell by the look and smell of him that he had been drinking for more than a day. No sooner had she said a word, he was crying again, begging her forgiveness, saying that he would definitely get a job, take up his mind. It's just that these shocks caused him to crave alcohol, and he was happy to meet his former friends. Julia, everything will be okay. I won't let you down. I'll take care of myself, I promise you. I promised you, didn't I? It's just that I've been treating my friends for days, and I've run out of money. Can you give me more? I'll give it all to you, I promise. I'll earn it and pay you back. You just help me again. I need to get cleaned up and live on something while I look for a job. I won't let you down. You believe me, don't you? Julia realized that her ex-husband used her, and she fell for it. Unfortunately, over the past 10 years, he had become the ultimate alcoholic and was now just manipulating, trying to evoke pity. She wasn't even sure if he was telling her the truth about his life. Most likely, the girl he was cheating on her with didn't force him to divorce. He had done it of his own volition, and he was just bullshitting her. Now she understood why she felt so uneasy at heart. It was as if she could sense that things were not going to turn out the way she wanted. Julia refused to give him money. When he heard affirm angrily, his eyes sparkled angrily. How is it? Do you understand at all? We have children together. I am their father. You have to help me. I will tell the children that you abused me. I will tell the children that you abused me. To the children. You're going to tell the children that I abused you. Well, maybe you'd better tell them why you left us and didn't even call us in 10 years, Julia asked with a sneer. But it was as if Vanya didn't hear her. He kept repeating the same thing. You must help me, you must. Do you hear? You have a lot of money, a great house. You did it all because of me. You got it all because I supported you. You owe it to me to support me. Otherwise, I don't know what I'll do to you. And Julia laughed. She realized how absurd this whole situation was. She had to get rid of him as soon as possible. She no longer wants to be around her ex-husband. You know what? Don't call me again. I won't pick up the phone. Live here as long as you want. Pay your utilities. If you don't pay, you'll regret it. I don't need this house, you need it. And if they take it away for debts, I won't get upset. I won't help you with money anymore. Remember, I'll tell the children. It's up to you what to do. You have 2 choices. Leave everything as it is or get smart. Only your future depends on you. Vanya. The woman left without any regrets that her meeting with her husband after 10 years had taken place the way she did. She only made sure that she could no longer rely on him. She wouldn't think about it. Let him live his life as he pleased. She has her own life. 2 years passed. Julia stood in the bridal salon in front of a huge mirror. She was wearing a gorgeous white dress from a popular designer. Soon, she would be the wife of a beautiful man she had met in Europe. It was strange that their meeting took place so far from home. After all, the man was from the same city as her. Alexander turned out to be a successful businessman. He had a chain of restaurants, and he was a lover of modern art. He madly liked the sculptures created by Julia, and he even bought several of her works. They stood in his home, and then they met in Europe, and from the first meeting, they fell in love with each other. Well, at least that's what Sasha said. Julia treated him with distrust for a while. After her ex-husband, she didn't trust men, but Sasha made her believe and love him so much that she even agreed to marry him, although not at first. Sasha had to propose to her 3 times, and only on the 3rd time did she agree. Not only good things happened during those 2 years. There were unpleasant moments too, and they concerned her ex-husband. After their last meeting, he did not take to his senses. He continued to drink, borrowing money from friends. Alcohol did not let him off that easily. During one more drinking binge, he burned down the house and miraculously survived. When he found himself on the street, he started begging and became homeless. Then, in his drunken stupor, he tried to steal from a small store. He failed. He was picked up and the police were called. The last thing Julia knew was that he had been locked up. She never heard from him again. Whether he was still in jail, out, or dead, she knew nothing else. But his fate no longer bothered the girl. She was happy. She was happy. She had been able to build a new life, to succeed, to find her soulmate, and it was so wonderful that she was ready to scream to the world with happiness. And she did, quietly, to herself.